The origins of the American Italian Mafia lie with the Sicilian Mafia. The two organizations are very similar, except the American Italian one is transported to New York on a larger scale and with a much longer criminal reach. Started by close-knit families of Italian immigrants, the American Mafia is separate from the Sicilian counterpart, yet origins can be distantly traced back. One of the main distinguishing features of the Sicilian Mafia, which the Italian-American Mafia later adopted, was the ancient Omerta code. The code revolved around 5 main principles: complete loyalty to all their members, not divulging any member any secret, even at the threat of torture or death, absolute obedience to the boss, avenging any attacks on the family, assistance to any member of the Mafia, and distance from the authorities. This overwhelming amount of Italian immigrants brought many old roots from the Sicilian Mafia with them. The same language and culture drove these immigrants together to live in pockets around New York, often referred to as Little Italies. The first notable beginnings of the American Mafia was in 1869, when the New Orleans Times published an article of concern. This article talks about recent gangs found in New York and the strange Italian descent that seemed to be connecting them. In the early 1900s, within these communities, Italian men, resentful from their poverty, formed an organization that exploited their rich neighbors and caused the 15-year-long scandal of La Mano Nera, the Black Hand. A wealthy Italian person would be blackmailed, prosecuted, and have threats made unless they paid a certain amount of money to stop the attacks. These criminals could not have picked a better time. New to America, there was not a trust built up of the government nor the law, causing the victims to be helpless. The threats that were often carried out as warnings or as vengeance included the burning of homes, murder, bombs, and the harassment of other family members. This grabbed the attention of the media, who compared it to a smaller mafia. The American Italian Mafia was starting up during this time, but was frequently linked to this terror. There were several prominent gangs that started to emerge in New York during this time, including the early Gambino family, who began a counterfeiting business and was connected to the Black Hand. There was a constant struggle of power between the different gangs, and a messy history that does not resemble the later, refined and organized mafia. By 1910, several gang leaders and their families were hunted down, including the Morellos and Lupos, after bank robbing and an accompanied murder. While the gangs were fighting for the coveted businesses and power in the ever-growing city of New York from roughly 1910 to 1918, slowly the shape of the deadly mafia was starting to form, as more and more families were joined and alliances made. The 1920s signified women empowerment, war, and above all, prohibition. The ban on liquor sent the public into a frenzy and opened the country up to the control of the waiting mafia. Tightly controlling the alcohol allowed them to profit and escape the law, as many officers and mayors turned a blind eye for some of the forbidden liquor. The turmoil in crime and alcohol smuggling led to clubs and other mobs to pay protection to the mafia in order for rival gangs or criminals not to break into the buildings. Combined with the profits from breaking the prohibition, the mafia became very wealthy rapidly, accumulating the control of the criminal branches in various cities, especially New York. The tension between the two major controlling mafias came to a head during the Castellarmese War, the late 20s to early 30s. After this turbulent and messy affair, a man nicknamed Lucky Luciano emerged as the leader and brought the American Mafia into the modern age. Luciano's new structure became known as the Commission, where each of the members had an equal say and ruled over the national crime syndicate. Despite the prohibition ending and the black market for alcohol diminishing, the mafia found other ways to continue thriving, including light drug trafficking and money extortion. At the height of power, there were roughly 26 recognized families in different cities, excluding the Five Family. The National Crime Syndicate was established in 1931. At the head was the National Commission. This was a six-man advisory board of top mafia and Jewish gang leaders. The New York Commission, Chicago outfit, and other mafia cities all reported to the National Commission. One of the most significant and well-known members of the Mafia was Al Capone, who managed to control the entire city of Chicago between 1925 to 1931, before he was convicted of tax evasion charges. He was different from the Mafia because he accepted members regardless of their race, religion, or background. A young Al Capone was in New York's The 5 Points gang before joining up with the Italian American Mafia. The most famous interpretation of the American Italian Mafia in media is the 1972 American crime film, The Godfather. It stars Marlon Brando and Al Pacino as the leaders of a fictional New York crime family. Initially, the American Italian Mafia was displeased with the notion of a film about their organization due to their strict codes of secrecy. A mafia don, Joe Colombo, publicly opposed the movie, as did Italian-American civil rights groups. Beginning as a peaceful protest, the plan evolved into a mafia intimidation campaign. There were bomb scares at Paramount Studios and threats made to cast members. Eventually, Joe Colombo and two associates were invited to make a deal. Colombo demanded that all repetitions of the word mafia be deleted from the script. There is only one use of the word mafia in the entire movie. The mob ended up staying involved in The Godfather, becoming extras on the set and showing up at Marlon Brando's trailer. In 1971, Joe Colombo was shot only blocks away from the filming of The Godfather in Columbus Circle. This was a planned assassination by the rest of the five families who had grown tired of Colombo. The Mafia's code of silence worked so well that until 1950 the public had not even heard the name Mafia. The downfall of the American Italian Mafia was partially attributed to the Racketeer Influence and Corrupt Organizations Act, which was passed in 1970, that targeted members of criminal organizations with additional prison time, harsher sentences, and more intense tactics. Eventually, the FBI was able to negotiate with the underlings until they were arresting leaders from different cities and causing others to break the loyal silence to give up high-placed members in order for immunity. Nevertheless, the Mafia is still present in the United States, working behind the scenes in Chicago and the Northeast. Since the FBI has been forced to prioritize the homeland security against terrorism, there has been less attention paid to the remaining Mafia. Recently, reports of a major corruption in Montreal have reached the news, with the blame being put on a once-arrested Mafia leader, with a chilling quote from an ex-journalist. The Mafia is still very much alive, and despite not having its former power, it is still a significant criminal organization that exists and is highly dangerous. The beginnings of this criminal organization can be traced back to the 1700s in the form of thievery and banditry. The members were publicly viewed as Robin Hood figures, since they divided and shared money and materials amongst the poor. This and later developments in the organization prompted the formation of the Voskey Mir, Thieves' World. This early mafia revolved around a strict code of conduct based on loyalty and government opposition. Despite the harsh repercussions from breaking the code, there was still a sense of familial obligation and responsibility akin to the American-Italian dynamic. However, once the Soviet Union was established in 1922, Vladimir Lenin and his successor, Joseph Stalin, hunted down many members of the early mafia in an attempt to wipe out the powerful criminal presences in Russia. In 1941, the Soviet Union officially entered World War II, and Stalin offered amnesty for all prisoners who served in the army. Associating with the government was a direct breach of the honor code. Those who chose to violate their oath far outnumbered the loyal Voskey Mir. This led to a series of bitch wars between the two gangs, as well as small disputes amongst the larger side. Eventually, the old mafia was disbanded, along with the honor code. Referred to as Bratva, the Brotherhood, the Red Mafia, or the organization, the Russian mafia truly rose to prominence after the collapse of the Soviet Union. The political disarray and chaos led to a flourishing black market, which the mafia carefully regulated. For a period of time shortly afterwards, it was estimated that the Russian mafia controlled 2/3 of the economy. The supposed structure of this organization combines of four groups. The first group, the elite group, are the leaders, who manages and organizes plans. The support group sets specific tasks and chooses who does them. The security group is in control of the security and intelligence carried out by the group. Finally, the working group are those who carry out the actual crime. After World War II, the mafia survived in the USSR by exploiting the economic system and selling illegal drugs. After soldiers returned from Afghanistan in 1980, the mafia heavily distributed heroin in place for the addiction of opium, which most of the soldiers had developed. Due to the extremely low wages by the government after the collapse of the Soviet Union, officials were easily bought and the corruption swept across the system. In 1992, more than 75% of businesses paid for protection, and crime had been the only growth industry. It is difficult to determine the period that the Russian mafia had the most power, yet it can be assumed that it thrived and developed alarmingly fast after the Soviet Union broke apart. This was all amplified during the following years, as the Russian mafia still casts a heavy shadow over Russian politics and has footholds in dozens of American cities and an astounding amount of countries. The mafia is estimated to have as many as 6,000 groups with more than 200 with global reach. Russian mafia members are known as the cruelest of them all and are only concerned with their own survival as opposed to the honor codes of the others in the world. Out of the three mafias analyzed, it is clear that this is without doubt the most dangerous in the height of power is current. The Russian mafia is not one united group, but all share a heritage, such as structure, rules, and especially tattoos. They still have secret symbolic tattoo rituals. Each of the tattoos have different meanings. For example, a skull on a finger means a murderer. A tiger on an arm marks a gang's enforcer. Traitors are forcibly tattooed with needles and a mixture of soot and urine as punishment. In the 1990s, Moscow was known as the Mafia Murder Park, as well as the Red Tide of Crime. There were different groups that fought against each other for protection, prostitution, and gambling rackets. This crime syndicate emerged as the most powerful. In 1994, they had 12 subgroups and more than 9,000 members. Now, they have both extensive operations in America and are connected with Italian mafia. The Soltsevo crime syndicate is the largest, wealthiest, and most powerful mafia in the world. This organization makes billions of dollars a year and, under the Soviet Union, penetrated both state enterprises and local government early on. They established their name as the most feared mafia in the world when they killed the head of the Georgian mafia, Ottare Kinsfashvili, who was previously the head of crime across Russia. The Soltsevo crime syndicate has over 5,000 members in the U.S. Many of these members took on a dead Jewish identity and escaped law enforcement. These members deal in stock market manipulation, sex trade, and illegal gambling, and launder several $billion a year. The U.S. Center, known as Little Odessa, is in Brighton Beach, Brooklyn. Another significant group of the Russian mafia is the Chechen. They are known to be incredibly violent and are connected to the Al-Qaeda. They are described as the CIA as an integral element of Al-Qaeda, providing access to global smuggling operation, high-grade weaponry, and financial support. An infamous key figure is Sergei Mikhailov. He is the head of the Soltsenevo crime syndicate. He is one of the most powerful men in the world and was arrested in Switzerland in 1996. He got off and continues to run the syndicate. Many of these key figures that have been arrested escaped due to bribes and to other threats. Key witnesses turn up dead, and the Russian government often refuse to help prosecution due to their bribes. Without doubt, Semen Mogilevich is one of the most respected and well-known figures in the Russian Mafia. He has recently been linked to mafias laundering billions of dollars through the Bank of New York. Semen has been part of the Russian Mafia since 1970. He runs the Israeli operations of the Soltsenevo crime syndicate and is on their council. In October 2009, he made the FBI 10 Most Wanted list. Although he was arrested in 2009 in Moscow for suspected tax evasion, he was released since the charges were not of particularly grave nature by the government. Overall, the Russian Mafia is known for their brutality and new ways of crime. They operate in more than 50 nations, almost has complete control over French crime, and has agreements with the Yakuza and different groups in Italy. The Japanese Mafia is believed to have originated from ancient samurai, after their country was at peace and the organization had fallen into disuse. However, members of the current Mafia argue that their descendants were groups that protected villages and served the greater good. Eventually, the start of the true Yakuza emerged in the early 1600s, considered the shadow government of Japan. These often consisted of peddlers, gamblers, and hoodlums. The biggest boost to the modern Yakuza was the end of World War II due to the social order breakdown. This led to a massive black market, which the peddlers and gamblers controlled. The hoodlums held positions of significant power and modeled themselves after typical 1950s American Mafia gangsters. Eventually, the Yakuza developed into a true power force in Japan, becoming known for their strict codes of conduct and organized nature. Following these three different categories of criminals, the Yakuza is set up with Teikiya street peddlers from fairs and markets, Bakuto gamblers from towns and highways, and Gurente hoodlums, the real mafia. All members are known to have body tattoo murals as a test of each individual's strength. These tattoos are known as irizumi. It's a bodysuit that covers arms, back, upper legs, and chest, but leaves an untattooed space down the center of the body. It takes more than 100 hours to complete and records enemies, victories, and personal member history. The name of the Yakuza is derived from a card game, Havafuda, as it translates into useless hands in society. Ya is 8, Ku is 9, and Za is 3, which adds up to 20, a losing hand in the card game. This particular mafia differs from the Russian and American Italian due to its indiscretion around Japan, as well as obvious dress styles. Driving flashy cars, wearing tight suits, and pointy-toed shoes with long hair is a sure sign of a Yakuza member. Designated clubs and buildings around the cities are conspicuously marked with a symbol of the Yakuza. Another difference between the other outlawed groups found around the world is that the Yakuza have a long political alliance with Japan's right-wing nationalists and agreements in the corporate world. This is similar to Russian mafia shadowy dealings with the government, yet is much more obviously presented. The set of family rules that govern life as a Yakuza member are the Wakamono no Kokoro. Among them is the Yubitsu, the severing of a pinky finger joint. This ritual occurs when a member has displeased their boss, and as a punishment, cuts off the top joint of the pinky finger. This is then enclosed in a small box and given to the boss as an act of reverence and redemption. This only makes it easier to identify Yakuza members. due to the combination of their tattoos and often missing finger joints. One of the difficulties in combating this organization is not only its involvement in politics, but the response from the people. The citizens of Japan considered the Yakuza part of the folklore and rarely attempted to retaliate. This group has a large presence in the media and operates internationally with 103,000 members. The Yakuza has such a large amount of control economically in Japan, to dismantle it would cause thousands of people to lose jobs. Only recently has the government begun to move against this criminal organization, as the people's long-standing folk beliefs are slowly shattered. Some of the notable criminals involved in the Yakuza include Kazuya Tauka, known as the Godfather of Godfathers. He transformed the clan and is known as one of the foremost brilliant criminals of the 20th century. The most significant clan in Japan is the Yamaguchi-gumi clan, which is the world's single largest organized network. Another significant clan is the Aigawa-kai clan, whose first head, Gaochui Inganoa, was known as Shuri no Mur, a man of great charm. He's an infamous leader that argued that Yakuza could counter communism.